you could have easily been known as Declan McManus. I'm sure it's a perfect exception.
You had enough difficulty saying it then.
Just the slightest hesitation, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. All my life, you know, at school, I'd say my name and I'd go, what? You know.
Really?
I mean, it's the hardest name to say on the phone. Too many N's and M's in it. Yeah, it's really hard to get over to people, and it's hard to spell. You know, people always put a D on the end of my first name. They always spell it MC, it's M-A-C. So in the end, I just took a family name. It's my great-grandmother's name on my dad's side, and it just was much easier to say.
What about the Elvis bit?
That was my manager's idea. He just said, "Well, you know, this will stop them. You know, this will make them think."
Yeah, it did actually.
And it worked.
I remember the first time I heard the name Elvis Costello, and I was a real Elvis Presley fan. I thought, dare this man call himself Elvis? It was almost as bad as saying Jesus, you know.
Well, that was the other name I was going to be. It was either that. It was either Otis, Elvis, or Jesus. It was going to be.
What intrigues me is that, I mean, 1 minute, as far as I was concerned, 1 minute you weren't there. The next minute, I saw you on the first Stiff tour with Ian Dury, and you had a hit record. It appeared to have
probably more than I saw of anybody else.
But you appeared to happen. I mean, Kim happened very quickly when it happened, as you've already said. But was that the case with you? Because I mean, you must have been sort of slightly into your 20s by the time you got
22
that.
when I was
22. So I mean, you presumably went to ordinary type of school, and then what happened after leaving school? And
I just got the first job I could. I left school in Liverpool. I didn't have enough qualifications to go to university. I didn't have any inclination to try any harder and really pursue anything. I didn't have any ambition other than to play music. So there seemed little point in going and, you know, killing myself, getting exams and taking more exams and taking more exams for the rest of my life, because I didn't want to do anything that it qualified me supposedly to do. So I played a bit on my own, played a bit in a couple of groups. I went back to live in London when I was 19. And just from there on, you know, sort of pursued rather kind of aimlessly, really, for a few years.
Did you have a burning ambition and a belief that you were going to make a career?
I did for the last 2 years. I believed that was good enough from just after 20. You know, that's why I think I built up quite a lot of resentment, because there's so little imagination in the music business. I think still is now, but it manifests itself in a very different way. I think they're quite written, but they couldn't see past, you know, a glossy image and well-produced demos that sounded like masters. Nowadays, they're more prepared to take on bands who are sort of have half a good idea, or that was prepared to sort of, you know, suggest something. But they just dismissed it all out of hand. And then later on, when I had songs which, you know, half the songs on my tape ended up on my first album, they were turned down by nearly every record company in the country, a percentage, and then I know that, you know, if I sell a record, then I really have earned the money, you know.
Yes.
Fortunately, the 3 deals I was offered, but Stiff had more enthusiasm, and well, they just were working at a much faster pace, which was more in keeping with what I wanted to do.
It must have been very exciting for you to have been really in the beginning of all that.
I mean, I left my job on the Friday, and we went down to Cornwall, rehearsed for a week, did a couple of out-of-the-way gigs, including supporting Wayne County in the Electric Chairs in Penzance, and then played London, you know, came back, we did a couple of other gigs in a disco in Plymouth, and then played Dingwalls and the Hope and Anchor, and went on tour around England, and we were on the road supporting people like Generation X and things like that, and we went away to America to do our first American tour, which was of clubs that were probably smaller even than the ones we were playing in England, because, you know, they were just like we played Scarborough Penthouse the night after the Sex Pistols and things like that, and they had all these crash barriers up from the night before, and they wouldn't let us in the hotel because they thought they'd just run amok in the hotel. I thought we were going to do the same, and, you know, we were really nice boys. We went to scout meetings and, you know, helped our ladies across the road, pushed them on a car. And then we went off to America. While we were in America watching the detectives, we were
It's sort of fairly notorious for your healthy disrespect for the press. I don't know, is that fair?
Well, I never got any of that. Nobody ever questioned until quite a lot longer all of the idea of the name and everything, and whether it was a whole stunt. There were a few cynics, but most of them took the music business on the face value and asked about that. You know, which was...
Do you prefer that?
Yeah, and I did the rounds of interviews, and a couple of people I liked, and then a couple I thought were complete idiots. I mean, the one guy came along and the first thing he said was, "I think you're a genius." Well, what can you say to somebody that says that to you? It's such a ridiculous, overblown statement. And, you know, I'd made one record. I mean, I felt I was embarrassed. and it made me angry. And you know, I just didn't. I just didn't know what to say to him, so I stopped doing interviews. And in that time, I suppose they either decided you were being enigmatic or very aggressive, and there were certain things that happened which are portrayed as being aggressive. We had instances with photographers and things that wouldn't take no for an answer, and so we got this reputation of being awkward with the press. But of course there's a lot of people among them that do have a brain and have got the right, you know, the right idea. That some of them are just in it to sort of glorify themselves.
Do you both regard the media as a necessary evil? I mean, do you think it's something you have to cope with in an album? Would you rather just make the album and go away and make another album, or go away and do a tour and not have to worry about it being promoted? How do you feel it's a pressure?
Well, I don't like sort of turning up on programs that I wouldn't otherwise watch or listen to, or, you know, appearing in papers that I wouldn't buy. You know, so, I mean, that's the only rule, really, that I have. If I don't watch the program, then I won't go on it. And I figure that it's a pretty pointless exercise to go on a program and try and be awkward. You know, like some people go on and they do the yes-no game, or they attack the person on the premise of what show you're on. If you're on the Russell Harty show, you've got to be on the Russell Harty show. You don't go on that and then pretend to be on something else, you know. I mean, if you've agreed to go on it, then it's more fool you. I think you end up looking an idiot, because they're professionals. They do it every day, and they're used to handling with difficult people.
Would you go on Wogan?
I don't think he'd ask me.
If he did?
I don't know. I never really thought about it. I don't know whether he'd have anything to ask me. I thought George was great on Wogan. I'm doing a French TV show on Saturday.
Which one are you doing?
Champs-Élysées.
Are you doing one I'm doing a French TV at the weekend as well.
The French TV is really odd. I mean, they have all these old people on, and they have like a half an hour, like totally. I mean, I can't understand any country that's got so much going for it in terms of style and taste, adoring Jerry Lewis. You know, they have this big film about Jerry Lewis, who I think is the worst. I don't think he's funny at all, you know, and they absolutely think he's brilliant in France. And then we have to go on after this film about Jerry Lewis, you know. So it's him at his press conference, mugging away horribly, insincerely, it seemed to me. And then we're shoved on this programme, so we seem totally out of place. And then you go to Italy, and they shepherd in an audience, sit them on the floor, and then shout at them through a megaphone to applaud from 2 feet away, you know. They all have their individual characteristics.
The French dither, so, I mean, they must be the most dithery nation that I've worked with. You know, that the record company, I was saying, Kim, we have to be there 10 minutes. Otherwise, you know, the producer, and like, you're saying, oh God, you know, you've got your toothbrush in your mouth, and you've sort of got your brush in one hand, and you're sort of like walking running downstairs, you know, makeup looking horrible, and you looking all horrible, and fat and overbloated from the night before, because they go and put loads of horrible French food in you and lots of wine. And then you sort of like get there, and you're sort of like a wreck, you know, and you're sort of sitting there, and you say, oh, I'm sorry, Kim, we have to wait an hour because, you know, and then and it's always the same.
A bit more of a disciplined approach in disciplining myself not to write. Recently, I didn't write anything for 6 months last year, willfully. I wrote 1.5 songs. You know, that just one which sort of forced its way out, and another which I wrote with Clive Langer. No, it's another one I've written since then. Other than that, I deliberately stored up everything that I had in mind and wrote all of the songs that I wanted to write for the next record in January, like in about 3 weeks.
Is that because you're very prolific and you have a tremendous amount of ideas?
Well, no, I just stored up all the ideas and phrases and fragments of lyric, but I didn't order any of them. And I had fragments of tune which I, you know, hum into a tape recorder, and I didn't even take them any further than that. Occasionally I pick up a guitar and you know, sort of attach a few of those melody ideas to a chord sequence, but other than that, I didn't. Normally, when I start, you know, I get to within a month of writing a record, starting a record, I've written quite a lot of tunes, albeit that they might change radically in the process of finishing the writing, and then the rehearsals can change, and then you get in the studio and you hear them and they sound completely wrong, and you jumble all the bits around and come out with something completely different. So I've applied different disciplines as time goes on. I mean,
what do you think Kim should do then? Go on, give us some help.
I don't know what you know.
I'm told that when Linda Ronstadt covered, talking about songwriting now, when Linda Ronstadt covered Alison, you were not actually the most pleased man in the world. Is that right?
My bank manager was the most pleased man in the world. I didn't think it was a particularly good interpretation. I think she's very overrated. And I think her standing in the music business now is more akin to her talent than it was when she made that record.
Well, it's so funny to be seeing you after so long, girl. How about the
Lad's version of Elvis Costello's song Alison, but it sold a lot of records, didn't it?
It was triple platinum or something. Consequently, it made me a lot of money, which made me seem rather churlish for criticising it. You know, it actually paid the rent much more than any record I released that year. There's been some versions of songs that have been done, I think, are terrific.
Like?
Robert Wyatt's, you know, I mean, but then again, I didn't write the tune for that. So, I mean, Clive Langer asked me to write words for this tune, which he said, I want Robert Wyatt to record. And it just went on from there.
Are you very proud of that song?
Yeah, very, yeah. I mean, I love Robert's version, and it was a tremendous effort to get my version down.
Your songs over the last year, the songs you've been associated with anyway, have been increasingly political. Do you feel that you're getting sort of more politically committed? And maybe, I don't know, maybe you always have been, but how do people react to you?
I don't like that idea of being sort of like, oh, he labelled as the politically committed singer, because then people stop listening to you. The whole point of doing it, I've said this before, but the first rule of being subversive is don't say you're subversive. Something Sting's never understood, you know, and I mean, if you make you know, if you're involved in making a record like Nelson Mandela, there's no point in trying to disguise it. Something like Shipbuilding's a bit more oblique. Pills and Soap even's a little bit more oblique than Nelson Mandela, but it's still pretty obvious what it's about. And I don't really want to be labelled as a political writer. I write about things that it's all things that move you, whether or not other people's interpretation is that's a political thing. It's what's important to you to write about. If you weren't moved by it, then you wouldn't write about it. I mean, some soft-sell records I really like. Others I can't be in a room with because of the pitching, you know, and that sounds a bit pompous, you know. But to people that really like him, they can't hear the pitching thing, you know. And I mean, he's very convincing when he gets the right song. And there's lots of people, I sing horrendously out of tune a lot of the time, you know. And it's just to the people that like the way I sing, they obviously don't hear it. I hear some of my old records and hear some of the singing on it. It's awful.
Now, you're just off to do this tour of America on your own.
It's a bit of a challenge, really. I haven't played on my own apart from at the beginning of shows for a few years. I, you know, occasionally open a show on my own. Just one guitar or with Steve playing the piano. And also, we've recorded an awful lot of songs in 7 years. And some of them, I feel, have been a bit overlooked because they didn't suit live performance with the band.
Are you going to do the same thing over here?
Well, I'm going to start to do this, and if it... I mean, I think, in some ways, people over here are a bit more critical, and they tend to like the rowdier element of what we do. Or maybe you're completely wrong. That's the impression I get.
Isn't that interesting? I hadn't thought of that ever before.
I just find when we get back from American tours, we tend to sort of drift into doing longer shows there. I don't know, maybe it's just being in length of time on the road, you sort of, things start dragging out, and you have to tighten things up when you get back to England so much more. People are much less, you know, they're going, what is this, you know, they just, you can see them look on their face, what is this rubbish they're playing here, you know, this, you drift into doing some long introduction because I think they have a tendency to respond to the more theatrical, and you sort of slide into doing it. I'm very anti the theatricality of stage performance, but I do find myself drifting into it in America because they respond to it, and it gives you a breather on a long tour. You know, if you do a long introduction, you can sort of just pause for a second and then you strike. You know, but in England they see right through that. People are much more, is he trying to kid, you know? And they don't want to know about all that. They just want to get on with the song. You know?
Yeah. Should we go see him, Kim?
Yeah.
We'll go sneak over and have a look at you, Elvis. You could have easily been known as Declan McManus. I'm sure it's a perfect exception.
You had enough difficulty saying it there.
Just the slightest hesitation, maybe.
Yeah, that's why. All my life, I you know, at school, I'd say my name and I'd go, what? You know.
Really?
I mean, it's the hardest name to say on the phone. Too many N's and M's in it. Yeah, it's really hard to get over to people, and it's hard to spell. You know, people always put a D on the end of my first name. They always spell it MC, it's M-A-C. So in the end, I just took a family name. It's my great...
Stiff tour with the Enduri. And you had a hit record. It appeared to have
probably more than I saw of anybody else.
But you appear to happen. I mean, Kim happened very quickly when it happened, as you've already said. But was that the case with you? Because I mean, you must have been sort of slightly into your 20s by the time you got
22
that.
when I
22. So I mean, you presumably went to ordinary type of school, and then what happened after leaving school? And
I just got the first job I could. I left school in Liverpool. I didn't have enough qualifications to go to university. I did for the last 2 years. I believe that was good enough from just after 20. You know, that's why I think I built up quite a lot of resentment, because there's so little imagination in the music business. I think still is now, but it manifests itself in a very different way. I think they're quite rigid. They couldn't see past, you know, a glossy image and well-produced demos that sounded like masters. Nowadays, they're more prepared to take on bands who are sort of have half a good idea, or was prepared to sort of, you know, suggest something, but they just dismissed it all. Grandmother's name on the dad's side, and it was much easier to say.
What about the Elvis bit?
That was my manager's idea. He just said, "Well, you know, this will stop them. You know, this will make them think."
Yeah, it did actually.
And it worked.
I remember the first time I heard the name Elvis Costello, and I was a real Elvis Presley fan. I thought, dare this man call himself Elvis? It was almost as bad as saying Jesus, you know.
Well, that was the other name I was going to be. It was either that. It was either Otis, Elvis, or Jesus. It was going to be.
What intrigues me is that, I mean, 1 minute, as far as I was concerned, 1 minute you weren't there. The next minute, I saw you on the first.
I didn't have any inclination to try any harder and really pursue anything. I didn't have any ambition other than to play music. So there seemed little point in going and, you know, killing myself, getting exams and taking more exams for the rest of my life, because I didn't want to do anything that it qualified me supposedly to do. So I played a bit on my own, played a bit in a couple of groups. I went back to live in London when I was 19, and just from there on, you know, sort of pursued rather kind of aimlessly, really, for a few years.
Did you have a burning ambition and a belief that you were going to make